It's gonna be a good program. It's gonna be fun.
Mhm.
Okay, we can admit people,
I
Aaron.
am.
Okay, good. And I'll help a little bit as well. Good morning, everyone. We excited to have you here today. While others are joining us, it'll take a minute or two. Feel free to enter your name, let us know who you are in the chat, where you're coming from, and if you want to connect with others that you see who are also joining us today, let us know your email or your LinkedIn profile. My name is Doug Dixon. I am a co-founder of the Encore Network and current secretary, and I'm here to welcome you to today's event on Trendspotting. We're excited to have you with us. We're excited to have a panel of experts who will give us some insights into what to expect for 2025 for older workers. The Encore Network is the next slide. The mission of the Encore Network is to champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people 50 plus. And we do that by creating community, by stimulating learning and inspiring action. And that's what we're all about in today's session. The next slide, please. So three things to start off with. One is that we ask you to mute yourself because we want to limit the amount of background disruption, and that we won't have any need for you to have your microphone on during the course of this event. Secondly, and connected to that, is that we do want you to use the chat to make comments, to connect, but also to raise questions. And if you have questions as the conversation proceeds for the panel, enter them as you go, because the panel also has access to the chat, and they'll be taking a look, and perhaps they can answer questions as we go. If not, there will be a Q&A session at the end, and we'll be sure to get to as many of your questions as possible. It can be helpful if you have a specific question to say question or a Q before that, and that'll help us to track questions amid other comments and so on. Finally, I just want to let you know that we will be recording. We are recording this event, and we will be sharing that recording probably on Friday. And a lot of resources, other information that's relevant to the conversation today will be included in that follow-up email. So you don't need to take notes unless you want to. Thank you for muting. I'm going to say again, please be sure to mute yourself. Our sponsor today, we're excited to be sponsored by the Del Mar Encore Fellows Initiative of the Dayton Foundation. The Dayton Foundation has for a number of years sponsored a program that harnesses the talents of people over 50 and applies that in a variety of non-profit and community settings. So thank you to the Del Mar Encore Fellows Initiative for sponsoring today's program. Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce the topic of the day. We're looking at the beginning of this year at a very uncertain economy and job market, and we are looking for insights into how that's going to affect older workers in the coming year. So we've assembled an impressive panel, and they're going to introduce themselves. Rich Eisenberg is our moderator. He's going to introduce each of our panelists. Rich is someone we've known for some time. He is a longtime journalist, was until a couple of years ago the managing editor of Next Avenue, the PBS site for people over 50. He's now unretired. I can't tell that he's slowed down a bit because he's writing for a number of publications, podcasting, teaching, editing, and so on. So, and has time for his grandchildren as well. So I will now turn it over to you, Rich, and look forward to hearing from you in the panel.
Well, thank you, Doug. And thank you, everybody from around the country and around the world for joining us today for Trendspotting the Outlook for Older Workers in 2025. I first want to say that we are all thinking about the people in and around Los Angeles who are dealing with the terrible fires. So about 2025, in some ways, I would say it looks like a challenging time for older workers. But in others, it's an exciting time with many opportunities. I think you're going to hear about both sides of that from our three panelists, and I can't think of any people I'd rather hear on the subject than the ones we've got today. So let me tell you just a little bit about each of them. Catherine Collinson is the CEO of the Transamerica Institute, where she publishes the annual Transamerica Retirement Survey, and she's constantly interviewing workers, employers, and retirees. Chris Farrell is the senior economics contributor at Marketplace on NPR. He's the author of the books Purpose and a Paycheck and Unretirement. I encourage you to read them. And a frequent writer about older workers for Next Avenue, the PBS site for people 50 plus, as Doug mentioned, where I was the managing editor, and I was lucky to work with him for many years. And Carrie Hannon is the senior columnist for Yahoo Finance, where she covers work, jobs, personal finances, retirement, and I think about a zillion other things. Is that about right? She's written many books, most recently In Control at 50 Plus, How to Succeed in the World of Work. I also encourage you to get that. We worked together for many years at Next Avenue and Money Magazine. As for me, as Doug said, I call myself an unretired journalist. I'm retired from a full-time job, but I freelance, I podcast, I volunteer. I write a lot about older workers these days and working in retirement for MarketWatch and Next Avenue. And I co-host the podcast Friends Talk Money. So now let's hear from Carrie, Catherine, and Chris. So for the next 40 minutes, I'm going to ask them questions about the outlook for older workers in 2025. After that, we'll have 10 minutes for questions from the audience, so please start putting them in chat whenever you can. We'll get to as many of those as we can. So I guess I'll start with a big picture question for the panel, and that is, how are you feeling about the outlook for older workers in 2025 compared with 2024, and why? Maybe we'll start with Chris, and then Catherine, and then Carrie.
So I'm optimistic about prospects for older workers in 2025, building on the momentum from 2024. And as we all know, there's a lot of uncertainty about economic policy and how that's going to unfold in 2025. So part of what I see is that organizations are going to put a higher value on people who have knowledge, have experience, will be able to navigate a lot of the turmoil. So I think the older worker will be seen as more valuable, building on the trends. And then there has been no change in the fundamental backdrop, which is the fact is, it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but the fundamental backdrop is we're still in an economy where firms are looking for workers, not an economy where workers are looking for firms. And so I think age discrimination is real, it's there, but it's declining as an influence. The backdrop of demographics in the workplace is favoring older workers increasingly. And then the uncertainty of 2025 and economic policy puts a premium on knowledge and experience.
Thanks, Catherine.
I share Chris's optimism for older workers in 2025. Our research has seen some steady progress over the years, and I really feel like 2025 is going to be the great moment for older workers, and for a few reasons. Chris has already touched on there are labor force shortages. Many baby boomers are exiting the workforce. There's inadequate supply to fill their shoes. And employers are opening their hearts and minds to older workers. The other thing is we live in a time of great change. It's something that my grandmother and grandparents always instilled in me. Change brings opportunity, and older workers are very well positioned to help be part of that change, bringing wisdom, problem-solving expertise, planning, and perspective, knowing how things can work, and also helping out and recognizing issues when things aren't working. And I also believe that employers are just really starting to get it. In part necessity, but in part they're realizing that they're missing out on an untapped opportunity.
Carrie.
Yeah, well, oh my gosh, we are an upbeat crowd here. It is absolutely, you know, my outlook is one that is optimistic, as we heard from Chris and Catherine. And there's lots of good reasons for that, which they've, you know, pointed to the fact that it is still a tight labor market for many industries, not across the board. That's the truth. But there are plenty of jobs out there, and there are plenty of employers who need people who can do the jobs now. They're not necessarily looking to ramp somebody up and have all sorts of onboarding. They're looking for folks like older workers who can actually have the skills and knowledge to step right in. But what I think the caveat here is that, you know, yes, I think the opportunities are there. They're going to continue. It's just a demographic fact that there are not as many younger workers moving into the workplace, and more older workers staying on longer. But the point is, the older workers have got to be open-minded in order to think about where their opportunities are, because it's not every industry. And so they really have to say, hey, okay, cool. I can redeploy my skills. As long as they've kept their skills relevant and fresh, I can shift over here. I spoke last week to Julia Pollack from ZipRecruiter, who's the economist there, and she said, you know, 50% of workers who got jobs recently switched industries. So even though you say, oh, I don't really want to do that, you really should think about it. That's where you might find the most opportunities. So yeah, I'm right on board. I think employers are starting to get it, but it's still up to the worker to be prepared to jump on those opportunities.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to hear such optimism today. I will throw out a few numbers just so our audience knows a little bit about the lay of the land right now. The unemployment rate for people 55 plus is 3.1%, which is quite low, lower than the overall unemployment rate of 4.1%. And the unemployment rate for people 55 plus was about 15% in 2020. So it's much better than it had been. But the real unemployment rate, which includes people working part-time who'd rather work full-time, is more like 7.5%. So that 3% number is a little on the low side. I'll also mention that 22% of job seekers 55 plus these days are long-term unemployed. That means they've been looking for work for at least 6 months, and that has increased quite a bit since 2022. So we'll talk in a minute about hiring trends. Last thing I'll mention in the number is that job satisfaction, according to Pew, is the highest among workers over 50. All right, so let's talk about hiring. And I'd love to hear the panel talk about the hiring trends that you're seeing these days and what do they mean for older workers. Maybe Carrie, you want to start since you've talked to some people about this lately, then Chris, then Catherine.
Yeah, super. Thanks. Right. So here's what I'm hearing is that, yeah, there are plenty of jobs, as I just mentioned, but the process is, you know, it's time consuming, and it's not as simple as it once was. So, you know, it does take longer. It is more difficult in many ways, but the opportunities are there. But I think what we're seeing is, you know, there's so much attention paid to these job boards, and there's nothing wrong with a good job board, but most people that I talk to, the hiring managers, are hiring people they know. Referrals is still the number one way. It's people they know or people they know. I mean, it's the old-fashioned way of hiring. So we drum up this all the time. The three of us, the four of us, when we're talking about work and jobs, it's who you know, it's who you know. And this is not changing. It's more important than ever because they're getting so many applications for jobs that you have to really do your song and dance. You have to showcase yourself. You have to have people at your back that can vouch for you. And I think this is something that some people, you know, kind of roll their eyes, really, networking, that's so boring. But I love to say networking is one letter away from not working.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just repeat what Carrie just said. But what I want to add is it's not really quite a hiring trend, but I believe that it is feeding into the hiring trend, which is coming out of the pandemic. One of the really big surprises was the dramatic increase in people starting their own business. And if you look at the longer term record, it was really entrepreneurship was declining in the United States. And it's always people be surprised about that because you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley and other places, entrepreneurship must be thriving. But the actual new business formation was in a decline. Well, that has reversed since the pandemic. And new business applications skyrocketed. And even though they come down somewhat, they're continuing. And so one of the things that I think in terms of with hiring trends is that when people get frustrated and they can't get a job through the job board, but they have knowledge, they have skill, they have experience, what they're doing is they're starting their own business. They may go into business with a couple of people, they just may be self-employed, be a solopreneur. But I think feeding into the opportunities for people who are applying for work is that a lot of people are just simply saying, now's the time for me to start my own business. And so, although that's not directly a hiring trend, I think that it's a lot of the same dynamics and it feeds into the trend.
Catherine?
Well, just building on Carrie and Chris, another thing that we see, because jobs are evolving. We live in a time right now where there are rapid technological changes, and those changes are transforming jobs. And this actually affects workers of all ages. And I even think of it as sort of riding the wave, understanding how jobs are changing so that you can recognize, oh, I can do this, and then packaging yourself accordingly when you're going out looking at prospective employment opportunities. It also means new types of jobs are going to be created. And that kind of levels the playing field, because if they're brand new jobs, it doesn't matter how old you are. They're new jobs. So to be a detective and research what the opportunities are, talk to as many people as possible. And that's part of building your network and getting to know people. But I just see there's a whole lot of opportunities, but you kind of got to get out there and do your homework and use your imagination and figure out how you can align yourself. And I also want to build on something that Carrie said, well, and both of you, with job boards, there is no substitute for networking and knowing people and ensuring that your resume gets on the hiring manager's desk. Job boards are overwhelmed with applicants of all ages, and it's just really difficult to cut through. A personal connection can make all the difference in the world.
Chris?
And Rich, just to follow up to this is that I do think where the job boards have a lot of value is for research. And you can use different, LinkedIn is wonderful for research. Job boards can be good for research. Going through the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, I mean, it's really, you can gather a lot of information about jobs and what they might pay and what you can expect and what are some trends. But when you're shifting from doing your research to where it is that I want to go to, I actually want to pursue this avenue, or here's where I'm interested in making my move. Then you're shifting into talking to people, 6 degrees of separation, having your informational meetings, and always remember, most people will meet with you. Yes, don't remember the one that turned you down. Remember the 9 that said, yes, I'll have coffee with you.
Thank you. Carrie, did you want to say something on this?
Yeah, I just want to quickly add that I recently wrote a column about how to get hired in 2025 on Yahoo Finance. And I just wanted to refer to a couple of things from that column. Is LinkedIn just came up last week with a report they do called Jobs on the Rise. And it kind of mentioned, goes into what Catherine was saying, but some of them kind of surprised me. The first couple were AI oriented, an AI engineer and so forth, a consultant for AI. But there was also the workforce developer, somebody who can go in and help companies do their retraining programs, their upskilling programs, which are super beneficial to older workers when they get that right. Travel advisors. I mean, who thought? But everyone's traveling these days and they want help. So, I mean, these were some jobs that maybe seemed out of step a while back, but they're back again. An event coordinator they mentioned. physical therapists, and I've always loved the one for older adults. So what I'm saying is check out that list, because I think research librarian was one. I mean, these are not necessarily newfangled jobs, but they're adjusted to the new technology, the new way the world is looking. So I really think, again, that's a great list, and they list the different things available. And again, healthcare is still a great area to look at. Construction, government, manufacturing, and some of the white collar jobs are actually not doing quite as well. This was per a discussion I had with the Indeed economist. He mentioned areas that were growing. So I think we need to reconsider, what industries are growing, which ones aren't, and what skills. Employers are looking for skills more than anything. I mean, it really trumps experience in many cases. If you can show that you have just a new certificate, you've added new skills, you're currently using them, even if it's in a part-time job or a volunteer basis right now.
Harry, you had something else in that Yahoo story that I thought was really, really great that I want to mention. You said that referred candidates get hired at a rate of 30%, while job applicants sourced through other methods only get hired at a rate of 7%, according to JobVite. So a lot of it is about who do you know and where you're getting your referrals from. And I want to follow up on that to all of you and say, and there was another story I want to mention from the Wall Street Journal recently. It was just mentioned in the chat too, about ghost jobs. These are those jobs that are advertised by employers, but they have no intention of filling those jobs. Well, there's a new survey that shows that ghost jobs these days account for 22% of jobs that are advertised online, which I was stunned to see. I knew it was big. I didn't know it was that big. I know a lot of older job seekers get frustrated. They respond to a job posting, they send in the resume, and then they never hear back. They think it's going into a black hole. So I'm wondering, what do you say to them? Catherine, any thoughts about that? Chris, after that, Carrie?
Avoid getting discouraged, and look for other avenues. You want to be there on the job boards. Also, it's an opportunity to look at your resume. The art of resume writing changes constantly to ensure that keywords are there and that they're firewall friendly, just ability to get through and get picked up. And then look at it as an opportunity to do homework about specific companies. If there's something you're interested in, maybe you know somebody who works for that company. Great source for research. So my word is don't give up, but use it as an opportunity to also identify other avenues.
Chris, what about the black hole?
Well, I also think this is where networking becomes important, and really working your sources, working the people that you know over time, because you can reach out, you'll find out. I mean, it's probably not 100% accurate in terms of finding out what's a ghost job and what's not a ghost job. But if you know somebody, they're in the company, as Catherine was saying, they'll tell you, look, we're posting these jobs, but right now we don't have the money. So we're posting them. They're kind of like placeholders. They're not really fake jobs. They're placeholders. And then depending on how 2025 rolls out, they may either fill them or they may gradually disappear. But I think this is your protection, is working your network, working the people you know, working the phones, working LinkedIn. I mean, these are the things that can help protect you. And you can find out, is this a real job or is this something that they put there as a placeholder?
And Carrie, some people say, well, I sent out 500 resumes and nobody responded to me. What do you tell people who say that?
Don't send 500 resumes. Oh my gosh, that makes my stomach turn thinking about it. You absolutely need to pick a dozen companies where you'd like to work, and that their mission speaks to you, that you care about the product, that you value what they do. This is our time to take control of the jobs we want. So let's be a little selective. We're hiring them too. So narrow your choices down, get on LinkedIn and say, who do I know at these companies? And that's where you're not going to get stuck in that cycle of not getting any response. At least you have somebody who can say to you, this is a real job. Chris and I have talked about this a lot. This is really important, to be selective about where you want to apply, and and then you can tailor your resume. You can see what openings they have there. And Rich, I will say one other quick thing is I absolutely love LinkedIn. And I know I've already mentioned it once, as have others, but I'm telling you, I am an older worker. And 3 years ago this week, I was hired by Yahoo Finance full-time. And it was through an a recruiter on LinkedIn who found me. I wasn't even applying for a job or looking for a job, but because I had a really active profile on LinkedIn, I was engaged. It was obvious that I was currently doing the job that they wanted to fill. In many ways, I was a great candidate for them, and it's been a fantastic thing for me. But I'm telling you, it's that LinkedIn connection that can really help people. There are lots of other good places, but I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn.
Eric, just one last question about LinkedIn, as long as you brought it up. What do you think of this open to work that LinkedIn lets people put on their profiles? Some people think it's a good idea, some people don't. Do you have any feeling about that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Rich, I'm not a huge fan of it. I just think it feels needy. It feels like you're desperate in a way. That's just maybe my personal take. There might be statistics that show that it's hugely successful to people. I'd rather take a quieter approach than being quite so blasting it out there.
Okay, I happen to think it's a good thing, and I feel like you've got nothing to lose by saying you're open to work, and it may lead people who see you to contact you to say, "Hey, I see you're open to work," but I know not everybody agrees.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece recently about creating what I call a retirement resume. If you're looking for part-time work or gig work in retirement, and what I heard when I was reporting that was that there's some people want to work in retirement and they really need to update their resumes. They haven't done that in 20, 30 years sometimes, and bolster their LinkedIn profiles to be stronger candidates. So I would say if you haven't done a resume in a while, it may be time to freshen yours up. Let me switch topics now to ageism. It's a topic that's you've already mentioned a little bit, and I've heard a little bit in chat already. It's something that we hear a lot from older job seekers and older workers. Now, it seemed to me like it was becoming a little less of a problem because of the tight labor market, and some states and cities have been cracking down on ageism by employers. But now I'm not so sure because companies are dropping their DEI policies. Age is sometimes part of that, often it's not. Companies are becoming more selective about hiring. So I'm wondering, what's your outlook for ageism in older workers in 2025? And I'll start with Catherine and then Carrie and then Chris.
Um, yeah, but through our survey work, we ask employers when a worker is too old to hire a job prospect, and we also ask when they consider them too old to work. I'm going to start with the glasses half full. More than half say it depends on the person, which I think is really good news. That's the half that we want to focus on. Among those who give an answer, though, the response, the median age, the response is surprisingly low. In our last published survey, which you can find on our website at transamericainstitute.org, the median age of those who gave a number of job prospects to hire was just 58. And at the same time, employers recognize workers want to extend their working lives and they're facing hiring shortages. So I think there's a lot of dots to be connected. And it really does, I'm going to focus on it depends on the person. And I think it's up to each of us, because I'm an older worker myself, is to do everything we can to live and work and lead by example. And we're not going to change everybody's hearts and minds all at once. But I think we can make tremendous progress. The other thing that we saw that is that we touching on DE&I is relatively few employers were actually considering age in their DE&I initiatives. So I don't know that the pullback on that we're seeing in the country right now is going to necessarily affect that. The other thing that we do see in our research, though, employers really do value diverse and inclusive workforces. So there's a lot of mixed messages going on, but in their totality, I see forward movement. But sometimes it feels like glaciers are melting faster.
Yeah.
But
I would say
I'm still optimistic.
I would say I've seen employers say that they love multi-generational workforces, but I'm not necessarily sure they really do. Carrie, what do you think about ageism in 2025 from employers? Do you think it's any better than it was before, worse, changing?
I depend a lot on great research like Transamerica does, and what they have found and what I hear anecdotally is that, it's inching, like small change, but honestly, ageism is still deeply embedded in the workplace culture. It's super hard to get away from that. And even the CEOs and the leaders, they have, even if they're older, they have bias against people their own age. So it's not, it's a tricky situation. And we should always add that younger workers have ageism issues as well. I mean, there's just as much saying you're not experienced enough and all that. It goes both ways. So it's not
my coat
we're the wine and
downstairs.
done. But I do find it, I think people are becoming more aware about it because we're talking about it. People like us we're making it part of the conversation. And we just need to continue to keep trumpeting that out. But change is quite slow. And until they're actually not able to find younger workers seriously, they're not going to take it too seriously.
Chris, any thoughts about this?
I think we're always amazed at how much senior leadership relies on stereotypes in so many of the decisions that they make. In terms of who they hire, who they don't hire. And Carrie made a very important point, is oftentimes involving young people or what kind of degree you have. I mean, there's all kinds of stereotypes, but there is, and I think it's indicative, Age Friendly Institute 15 years ago, they did a survey, and it was about, facing ageism at work. And I believe it was like 95, 96% in the first survey. And the latest survey, which was in August, is down to 65%. And so that sort of echoes with both what Carrie and Catherine are saying, which is that it's still terrible, right? But the direction is going in the right direction. The other thing I would say is you just have to look at the numbers. I mean, people are hiring a lot of people 55 plus. The labor force participation rate is going up. The Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts that 57% of new hires out to 2032 are going to be 65 and over. So you just sort of start looking at the numbers and you look at the actual hiring. And what I become convinced of is an awful lot of this has nothing to do with being enlightened, with being understanding, with being a good citizen. It simply has to do, how does the organization get its job done? And if it turns out that your applicants are older, you're going to hire them because you need to get the job done. And that's what more and more companies are facing. I think if in their ideal world, everyone would be 20 years old that they could pay really little low sums to, and they could dominate and tell them what to do. That's not the world that they live in. And so this, low unemployment is one of the great pressures for social change that is out there. It doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen right away, but low unemployment is a pressure for social change.
And the demographics too, because it seems like
Yes.
for the long term, we're going to be seeing not enough younger job applicants, younger workers, and a lot of older people who want to work and can work. So I feel like employers in some ways will need these people because there aren't going to be enough younger people for them. Carrie
And what it really does, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, no, Chris, finish. I'll go next.
I was just going to say, and what that really means is if we were having this conversation in 10 years, we're not going to be talking so much about younger workers and older workers. We're going to talk about intergenerational workforce, intergenerational teams. The word that we will be using is intergenerational. Gary?
Oh, yeah, I meant to add as well, Rich, that in terms of pushing back on ageism in the workplace, I think the emergence of remote work and virtual jobs has been enormously helpful to older workers and will continue to be, even though some companies are calling people back to the office. I get that. But the ability to work remotely is huge, because if anyone, and companies got hip to it coming out of the pandemic, they know how to do it. They actually, a lot of them want this. And if you have any health disability issue that makes commuting difficult, the ability that has taken you out of the workplace because of a health issue, it offers that opportunity to stay in the workplace. In addition, if you're not right next to somebody who's 20 years younger than you, it's subliminal, but you're not, like, that ageism thing doesn't creep up quite as much. And so I think the opportunity to have a remote, and also think contract, the emergence of this slew of contract positions now, yes, it's not ideal for everybody, but it's great. They're often remote jobs, and it's great for keeping older workers active, their resumes alive, and opening the door to future full-time possibilities.
One last thing I'll say about ageism before I go to solopreneurship and entrepreneurship again is there's a study by something called My Perfect Resume. They found that 92% of older workers said that they felt pressure to either conceal their age or downplay their experience to avoid negative perceptions at work, which I thought was pretty terrible. But one way people can maybe avoid ageism from employers is to become their own boss, where you don't have to report to anybody because you're the boss. So I know, Chris, you talked a little bit about that, but I'm wondering if you want to say anything more about what do you think the outlook looks for self-employment and solopreneurship for older adults this year? And then I'd love to hear if Carrie and Catherine have anything they want to add.
Well, I just think this is one of the most important and surprising trends. I mean, I don't know about you, Carrie, but I know when I was, doing stories in the 1990s, the consistent message was, oh, older people can't start their own business. This is way too risky. This is a terrible thing to do. Starting your own business is 24/7. There's all this stuff. And what has emerged is that what we realize is that the economy has changed in good ways that really does help and encourage as people get older to start their own business, to be the solopreneur, to be self-employed because they have knowledge, they have skill, they have experience. You might have just a little bit of money. Technology has lowered the costs of many of these businesses. You have a house and all of a sudden you have an empty nest. So that becomes your office. And so this is one of the most exciting trends. And Carrie had mentioned about, contract work. And one of the things that does seem to be evolving in 2025, so there's a lot of opportunity in contract work, gig work, freelance work. And so I see more and more people that's where some good opportunities are. Plus, when you reach that stage where you want to keep making money, but you sort of want a little more freedom, a little more flexibility, and you don't want to be asking somebody, hey, can I have some freedom or flexibility? You just want to have some freedom or flexibility. That's where self-employment can really become incredibly important. So I think it's really a key component of this whole movement of unretirement.
Carrie, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to we all want autonomy. I mean, that's the goal at this stage in life is we want to be grown-ups and in control of our time. I think entrepreneurship, and Chris and I have been on this for a long time. It is still as hot as ever for this demographic, and just for the reasons Chris mentioned. And the beauty of it is, and he mentioned that, and I mentioned contract jobs too. This is great. Not only is it not as that expensive to start your own business because you don't need bricks and mortar. You don't have to do all the jobs. You don't have to hire anyone full time. You can get a contract worker who can helicopter in and do your books for you once a month, and somebody who can do your social media marketing, and you build this whole freelance economy together, that they're your support staff, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to build your business today in the way it once did because of technology. And there's so many opportunities out there. Yes, you have to be, make sure that the niche is there, that it's why me, why now, why this product. You can't just start something. But the fact is, if you know your industry, you know where the holes are, you know where the opportunities are, and you have a network of people in that industry to help you launch yourself and get started. So I think it's super important. It's a great thing. One quickly, I need to say that everyone who's on this call probably knows this, but when you're an entrepreneur running your own business, there are some important things you got to remember. You got to pay attention to your taxes. This is really tricky. And if you have started taking Social Security before your full retirement age, be aware that there is this earnings test for Social Security. You get it all back. You get it all back after a while, but the limit to how much you can make before they start docking your Social Security is $23,400 this year. So there are things you need to talk to your accountant. Make sure you know what you're doing because there's huge opportunities for success, but pay attention to the details.
There's a comment in chat I just want to be sure to mention, which is that it can be hard for people who've worked for their whole careers for a corporation to then suddenly become an entrepreneur. It can be exciting, but it can be difficult. It's a big adjustment for some people.
Yes.
One question I want to ask.
Can I
please,
jump in and
please,
comment on that? One thing that we haven't talked about, both in the job seeker context and the solopreneur, start your own business context, is to find a mentor. Seek out people who have done it and been successful at it, and ask them out for coffee, invite them to a Zoom. but learn firsthand how they found success, what their journey was, what the pitfalls along the way, and how they ultimately achieved success. All too often we think about mentors as something for younger people. You can have a mentor at all ages, and this is an especially critical time that it can be super helpful and help you build your network and find opportunities.
Thank
That
you.
is so important. And the other thing is, in most communities now, that didn't exist before. There is a network. It may be associated with a college or a university. It may be an incubator. It may be a co-sharing workspace. But there are so many resources to tap to help you start your own business. And, you're right. It is difficult to make that shift if you've been a full-time employee. But hey, learning is always fun. And you're learning new skills.
Yeah.
And you can teach an old dog new tricks, no question about it.
Yeah. So we've got about 5 minutes before I'm going to open this up to questions from the audience. I've been jotting down a bunch of good questions I've seen in chat. Thank you for all those. If you've got others, please put them in now. We'll get to as many as we can. And I've got a few questions I want to ask specifically to one or two panelists. But before I do that, I have one question for the whole panel, which is, how do you feel older workers are being supported these days? I know Doug Dixon thinks the country is doing a pretty poor job of this. So anybody want to just jump in on that?
But how do you mean supported, Rich?
I mean, appreciating them, helping them out, showing them what they could be doing to find work, to keep their jobs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think,
Now-
Rich, we've also had several questions that tie into this same theme. So that alongside of that is, are these employers supporting a intergenerational work teams? What are they doing? Are they actively having managers recruit people from inside their company who are more of mixed ages? So what's the actual work going on in companies that support workers of all ages working together?
Thanks, Christine. That's probably best for Catherine, I think. Catherine?
One thing that we see that employers are doing, especially among larger employers, are having employee resource groups dedicated to generations with the goal of bringing different generations together, opening up lines of conversation, because there are generational differences in terms of both life phases and life experience. So that's a best practice that I'm really enthusiastic about. Some employers are actually offering training about generational differences. Another best practice is not just mentoring programs, but reverse mentoring programs so that people can learn from each other regardless of what their age or experience is. It's a transfer of knowledge and a building of skills and hopefully a friendship too.
And Catherine, in your study from last year, I think it was, or end of 2024, Transamerica found that there were more employers offering workplace training to their older workforce than had previously done that. So you saw an incremental jump up in that, correct?
Yeah, we're seeing an uptick, and the way we pose the survey question is training professional development programs for workers of all ages, including those who are age 50 plus. And we have seen an uptick in that. One thing I've seen observationally is employer investments in job training kind of ebbs and flows with the overall economy and how their business is faring. I'm a believer that investing in training is the ultimate investment in your workforce, but oftentimes if employers are in a crunch, training can be cut back on, which is, I know, a difficult decision to make. However, right now, we are in such a time of profound change, both, if we look at everything globally, nationally, locally, technological advances, investing in training for workers of all ages, including the older workers, is absolutely imperative because jobs are changing, realities are changing.
But I do think in terms of support, just to your question, also, there's always been this dream of institutionalizing, like when you retire and you work for a company that has a 401k, they hand you this packet. And here's your packet, your 401k, here are your options, here what you can be thinking about. And we're still at a phase where It's a lot of individual initiative. It's a lot of people who are going out there and meeting up with like-minded people and trying to create it, reading articles and having, joining discussions like this. It really hasn't been in terms of support. I think it is still somewhat, it's these companies are doing it, these industries are doing it. I know I've done some stories, I think Carrie has done some stories that some of the high-end manufacturing companies, which you would not automatically think about, really do take this intergenerational very seriously. But there are other industries they could care less. I mean, that's just not our problem.
And there's,
So we're still in the trying to make this ecosystem work.
I got to ask everybody about AI, but particularly Chris, I want to hear from you on this because I know a lot of older adults are worried about AI, that it might make them lose their jobs or not get jobs. But I think I heard you say that you think in some ways AI could be a good thing for older workers. Chris, you want to talk about that?
Yes, I think overall AI is good for the workforce, but if you're looking over the short period of time, the next couple of years, and you look at what AI is going to be doing is automating certain tasks. And then what happens when that's happening is that there's a greater value on judgment and experience and knowledge and kind of, there's a formal book that says how things get done in organizations. And then there's the informal book, which is how things really get done in organizations. In that informal book, you have to have experience to understand it. So I think the next couple of years, actually, organizations are going to put a higher premium on knowledge and judgment and experience, which translates into AI net is a benefit for older workers, particularly as AI also can make jobs less stressful, less in certain ways.
Thank you. So now let's go to questions from the audience. I'm going to kind of ask our panel to do this as much as possible as a lightning round because I want to get to as many as we can. So if I don't get answers from all of you for each question, I apologize, but I'd love to get to as many questions as we can. So one question that came up is, are you seeing any trends about bigger companies versus smaller companies versus medium-sized companies in their interest in hiring and keeping older workers? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I like to think smaller companies are. I've seen a lot of small associations, startups, like even as we were talking earlier about the entrepreneurship, they're looking for people. If we're starting a business and we're a bit older, we're quite happy hiring somebody who's in our age range as well to augment our work. So I do think, but I think I see more of the activity at the lower end than the big companies that have more policies in place.
Thank you. And I guess that also means that may be a good place to be looking for jobs is locally or through small businesses that you may have some connection to. Another question that came in was, how can people sell their wisdom and experience if they're not up to date in their technology skills? Anybody?
Well,
I think in terms of the technology skills, there's so many resources out there. And again, depending on your industry, I've learned that in marketing and advertising, you can have some real changes in the technology. In my industry, I mean, we use technology all the time, but quite frankly, it's an evolution. It's not particularly difficult. But I think there are a lot of really good resources in almost every community to try and help you, but figure out what it is you really need, right? Because you don't have to learn how to program. AI is going to do that for you anyway. But what you do need to do is, okay, what are the programs that I need to understand, and I can pick up some other stuff if I get the job that I want.
and you can find out what those things you need to know by looking at the job description or look on LinkedIn at people who have similar jobs. What skills do they have? Do I need that? How do I go about getting it? Lots of places to cherry pick learning new skills online. You don't have to sign up for a big graduate program. It doesn't have to be super expensive. And Rich, can I say quickly, I'm a big fan of if you're marketing yourself, it doesn't take that much tech savvy to know that if you can somehow on your resume and on your LinkedIn profile so far in an interview, tell your car story, the challenge, the action, the result, have numbers to quantify what you've done, what problem you solved, how you did it, how you brought in sales, or you got ahead of schedule on something. Hiring managers want those numbers. They want that statistic, and it's a great way to showcase yourself.
Are there anything you've been seeing in terms of what kinds of tech skills employees or job applicants and older workers should be working on, and are they actually looking for those skills and getting up to speed?
I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways, and you see me smiling because the first thing is to have some confidence. Take stock in your skills. There's this I'm going to call it weird stereotype or societal hangover that older individuals aren't tech savvy. If we look at the workforce, we have boomers, Generation X, millennials. They were here for the PC revolution. There's already been widespread technology adoption, even among the older generations, Gen X and boomers in the workforce. So give yourself some credit for the skills that you have. Another is it's kind of like surfing. You got to ride the wave and see where you're at and see where you can catch up. But for most people, I don't think you're starting at zero. I think you're starting much further ahead that you think you are. And then the other thing that I see and hear all the time is, oh my gosh, buzzwords and jargon, and technology is just ripe for jargon. And there's new words today which conceptually are the same word, a different word that was used 20 years ago in a technology application. So I think part of it is having confidence, knowing where you can grow your skills, because chances are you already have a really good foundation, and also keeping in mind there's a lot of jargon out there that you just need to wade through.
We had a question that came in that deals with the new administration. We're not going to talk politics here, but the question was when Trump was elected the first time in 2017, this person wrote, a lot of employers sort of put the brakes on spending until they saw sort of what was going to happen. And they were wondering, are we going to see that again this time? Now, I will say that I just saw in the Wall Street Journal a new survey that said nearly 2/3 of employers say that they plan to add permanent roles in the next 6 months. And that's a big rise from the middle of 2024. But any of you have any thoughts about what you think the effect of the new election may mean for older workers in any way?
For whatever reason, right now, I've seen the same optimism from the employers I've spoken to. There is this idea that there's this renewed, that business is going to be good, at least through the first part of the year. And so they're saying they're hiring. Will they actually do that? I can't tell. I don't know. But that's the sentiment out there right now, that there is this sense of optimism. Chris, have you seen that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's coming into the new year, that there is that sense of optimism. And I think it's really two optimisms coming together. I mean, one, a sense of optimism that there'll be less regulation and a number of other things that have been discussed, but you also have AI having a bigger impact in terms of investments that are going on in companies. So I think between the two, companies are coming into this year thinking, yeah, we're going to be hiring. We're not back in, 2022. We're not back at that surge of hiring, but we're back into a world where companies are enthusiastic about their prospects, and you're seeing it in the markets.
Would you share that enthusiasm if you're a current government employee? I mean, given there's a new initiative called DOGE. I mean, they seem to be going after multi-layers of government agencies of all types. What would you say to someone who's currently an employed by government at the state or federal level?
Well, personally, I would say two things. One, employees at the state in government have enormous skills and knowledge, and they're experts. They know a lot. So there would be the same advice that I would give in any industry. If you're nervous about your job, if you're nervous about where you're going, forget your job category, start thinking about what are your skills, activate your network, what might be your options. The other thing is, let's have a dose of skepticism and let's wait to see what really happens, as opposed to what is being tossed against the spaghetti that's going against the wall. My suspicion is that we're going to see a lot less action.
So we've just 2 minutes left. There are three things that people have asked about, and I want to just throw them all out and see if any of you want to talk about any of them, but maybe pick one. One was fake job listings. They're seeing a lot of fake job listings. What do you think about portfolio websites? And what about fractional work? So anybody want to pick any of those?
Well, I think fractional work is much along the lines of contract work. And the opportunities are great there, particularly for employers who, again, or startup businesses or small, independent businesses who don't want to have somebody on staff full time, but want to have this regular relationship. And I think if you're starting off on your own as starting your own consulting business, being a fractional consultant or worker is super.
And Catherine, Chris, anything about either portfolio websites or fake job postings?
I want to comment on the fake job postings, and something that we haven't touched on is data, your personally identifiable information and your data security. And bad actors prey on vulnerable populations or people who are, for example, job seeking. Be very, very, very careful as you're inspecting, especially if it's not a major company or who you are looking at those job postings. We know they're out there, and you don't want to give up your personal information unwittingly because you're unaware that they may not be operating in your best interests.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to turn it back to Doug. I want to ask you for your top piece of advice for older workers or older job seekers in 2025. It could be about job seeking, about keeping a job, starting a business, whatever you want. So Chris, one piece of advice, and then Catherine, one piece, and then Carrie, one piece. Thanks.
Okay, so my one piece of advice is really work with your network. And I know that sounds yuck in some way, but look, these are people you know, these are people you care about, these are people you worked with or you met at temple or at church over your lifetime. And so you get two benefits. One, you have connections, so you're not lonely. And two, they'll help you figure out what you want to do next. And then three, they'll help you get what you want to do next.
Thank you. Catherine.
We ask a survey question of people what they're doing to help themselves work as long as they want and need. And surprisingly few, given what's at stake, indicate that they're safeguarding their health, performing well at their current job. You got to be a superstar. If you are employed, be a superstar, and also staying current, keeping your job skills up to date, which I know is really hard. But the other part of that is it seems like there's a lot of opportunity, not for people on this webinar because you're here, but to go out, and so many resources available to learn about jobs and what's out there and what might be right for you.
Thank you. Carrie, bring us home.
Right. Have some moxie, definitely. I love what Catherine said. Believe in yourself, for gosh sakes. If you're not going to get hired if you don't think you should be hired. So have some moxie and don't be stuck in a moment like Bono sings in the U2 song. Absolutely be open-minded and have that moxie.
I hope everybody can find what they're looking for. So Doug, over to you. You're on mute, Doug. If Doug is speaking, I cannot hear him.
I can't either.
He's got his.
Okay,
There he
here
goes.
I am.
There we are. Thank you.
Sorry, my mute button disappeared and I don't know why. But in any case, I did find it. So thank you very, very much. I'm reading the comments in the chat. People are commenting on how informative this has been, and I appreciate the effort that all of you have made in that regard. So that's number one. Number two, Rich, you just demonstrated a master class in how to conduct a panel. So thank you very much for doing so.
Thanks.
And thank you to each of our panelists. So next slide, please. And I'm looking for, there you are. hold on just a second. Okay, there you go. The first thing I want to say is thank you to our sponsor today, the Del Mar Encore Fellows Initiative at the Dayton Foundation. I appreciate their sponsorship of today's program. And if you're not already a member of the Encore Network, this is a great opportunity to join. We're offering a 10% discount as an added incentive if you join between now and the end of the day next Monday. We'll include information about how to do that in the email that I promised that we'll be sending out at the end of the week. That'll include the recording. It'll also include information about resources, a lot of the things that our panel, Rich, Chris, Carrie, and Catherine have written and produced on the topic. And it'll also include information about how to activate, how to join the network if you haven't already. You go to our website, you'll see the join button, and just add event special where you're asked to in the code. Next slide, please. We do have a couple of events coming up that I want to highlight. One is on February 19th, we'll be talking about tackling ageism with advocacy. We've talked a lot this morning about the impact of ageism on older workers and older job seekers. We've talked about how to navigate the current system. The current system isn't always as friendly and as well designed as it should be. And we know that there are changes that can be made. We're going to be talking about how we as individuals and organizations who have an interest in older workers, what we can do to help change the system and make the system work better for people over 50. Next slide. We also have an event coming up the day before Valentine's Day. Lynette Reiling, who has written a book called Your Encore, will be talking about compassion as a component of our experience in life at this stage. Next slide. I want to mention that we have a number of affinity groups. Many of you have participated. If you haven't, check our event calendar and you can sign up there. We have a number of options to get more deeply into some of the topics that we talked today about and others as well. Next slide. Finally, we have a peer consulting program. If you have interest in that, go to our website and check it out. We will follow up with you. This is an opportunity for people who have questions about their business or about their practice or about something else to get input from other members. So this is a terrific opportunity. We encourage you to take advantage of it. So with that, I am going to wish all of you a good day. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks to our panel and good wishes for a wonderful 2025.